So Asmongold did a review of Last Epoch after 30 hours. I think has he played more than that? I could have swore he played more than 30 hours, but I guess we're going to find out here today. Kind of curious about what he's going to say. Because 30 hours... Let me put myself in the corner here because he's probably in the bottom right.
I'm going to go ahead and give some thoughts about the game.
I want to make this very clear because I don't want anybody
2 hour
to get
review.
it twisted.
Yeah, we're not going to watch. I mean, there's no way we end up watching all 2 hours. I just want to see the initial review of it because the last bit is he's playing. The review is only the first portion.
This is not a review.
Is he playing lightning ball stork? What the hell's going on?
My opinion of the game at this time of the game, right? And I'm like level 81. I've played it for, I don't know, like maybe 30 or 40 hours, something like that. You got
decently far.
This is kind of like, I wouldn't say my first impressions. It's not my last impressions. It's not a full review of the game. This is just like my temperature read on the game at this point, right? I mean, how many fucking times we're going to preface this? So you guys see kind of what I'm saying, right? And so anyway...
Dude, I love being a streamer, and you have to have like 15 disclaimers because you just know there's going to be a million people in chat that like take what you say the wrong way or try to play gotcha Andy words. Well, you've only played 30 hours, and I played 33 and a half, so therefore, Your Honor, it's invalid and I object. Like, you have to do these million disclaimers.
This is the halfway point. Yeah, you could say that. Overall, I would say like leveling in the game feels very kind of slow at the end. Like I will start off with that, like, because that's been what I've been dealing with, like right off. Is I do feel like leveling like really slowed down a lot, and I'm not sure exactly like how exciting I think the gear is, but I will start from the beginning of the game and talk about like the beginning of the game. I think that playing through this game, and especially the campaign, was very good. I really liked the campaign. Now, why did I like it? I liked it because it gave you a number of difficult bosses. Some of the things in the campaign were voice acted. They had trailers, or sorry, not trailers. They had cinematics for
the cinematics were mid. They were cool, but I think they were mid. I think the bosses were pretty cool, and it was more difficult the next playthrough after the 1.0 release. It felt more difficult to me. I don't know if you guys felt that, but it felt like they got the difficulty of that campaign up a little bit.
For the fucking campaign, I don't know, I just can't say this, but yeah, I think it's had that. Like, I like that you were able to craft gear while you were doing the campaign, because I feel like in most ARPGs, you hardly ever craft or do anything. You just pick up the loot and go.
That's actually a pretty good point. That's actually one of the first people if not the first person I've seen that pointed out the crafting mid-campaign. I guess POE, you do definitely add some crafts on. Like you can go and do the rustic sash recipe, etc. from the vendors. There are some of those, but in Last Epoch, it's like very obvious you're crafting as you level up because of the level requirements in order to do the craft. That's actually a pretty good point.
But because crafting in this game is very easy to do, and inventory management isn't really that much of a chore in the same way that it is for, like, I'd say PoE or for Diablo, you feel like you're able to make on-the-fly decisions and change what you're going to do pretty quickly.
That's true, which was one of the things I said in my original review is I thought that the diversity of gameplay that you can very quickly respec and like change things. Yeah, you got to re-level if you're doing the skills, but the way they increase the base floor of the level to make it easier to level and you get boosted XP basically until you get caught up, etc. I actually think the respecing part of it is pretty nice. So it does actually change what your character feels like as you go through. You could end up with like 3 different builds you've played by the time you get through the campaign. And adding the gear, etc. during the campaign, it makes the earliest part of the game spicy and diverse, basically.
So, do you think the lore is interesting? I think any sort of time travel lore is inherently very hard to follow.
Yep.
So I don't fully understand what even happened in the story. And this comes as somebody who, like, listened to a lot of the dialogue and everything. I don't really understand it that well. But I could also just be... like, whenever I play a game on stream, my attention is always, like, divided between the stream and the game. So I'm not really fully focusing on that.
Yeah, I do the same thing. You have a million people in chat all like leaving funny memes and shit that you're reading, and so you're not really like fully focusing, which can make it hard playing hardcore. Not gonna lie, I've died reading chat more times than I would care to admit. But I will agree with time travel and multiverses are easily a story type that I will not pay attention to, even if it's well written. This has nothing to do with the writer's ability and everything to do with me not liking time travel and multiverse. It doesn't matter if it's Marvel, Star Wars could do it, and I'm not going to like it anyway. And there's some argument they kind of already have with the Force shit, with Ahsoka, etc. But I'm not really like a big fan of timeline and multiverse style of writing. I don't enjoy that personally. So normally I just kind of tune out when that happens. And I did the same thing with this campaign. I enjoyed the campaign from a playthrough perspective, but from a story perspective, I could not have cared less.
So it's hard for me to really like put a lot of thought into the story and like really evaluate it, especially whenever this is the kind of game that I play for really the gameplay and not the story. The story is nice, but it's really about the gameplay. That's the reason why I'm here. And I think that some of the aesthetics in the game, like the graphics in the game are, I think, like they're good. Like the graphical fidelity with a lot of things, like I would say like this is like actually quite bad. But at the same time, there is an art style of the game that I think is very good. And I'll give you an example of that. I think the end of...
Yeah, let's see what he's going to... Because I didn't think the graphics were bad. I have seen people talk about the graphics significantly, but I didn't think they were bad pre-launch, and I definitely don't think they're bad now. But maybe I have a lower tier... I mean, look, I like RuneScape, okay? So maybe I have a very... And I like Raven Dawn and Maple Story. Like, maybe my sense of graphics is just not good. So...
Time is probably the best example of that. So this is a relatively like low, like in terms of like graphical quality, but this is amazing. This is incredible, and I think it really goes to show that whenever you have a game that has a great art direction and a great art style, I think that's going to carry the game a lot farther
that looks good to me.
Than graphical fidelity. And I think that last Epoch...
That's a pretty good point about being able to distinguish art style from actual resolution, basically. I think that's a pretty good point. Art subjective. Yeah, no, that's fair too. I actually prefer low polygon count if it's done properly. Over like the extreme graphics don't really sell much to me, in my opinion. Like if the game is good, that's what I care about. Graphics can be sort of whatever. Like I played Fortnite and I hated the art style in Fortnite. I hated it. I felt like a child when I was playing the game. But I liked the gameplay of it when it was out and about and we were all trying to shoot each other in the head and stuff. But I hated the art style. All right, which for me didn't have to do with the fidelity of the graphics. I think that's a good word to use for it. But anyway,
definitely shows that. I also want to say that I feel like the abilities in the game feel extremely good to use, and I would say that the abilities in the game feel better to use at the beginning than they do in PoE.
Oh, that's absolutely true.
And they feel worse to use at the end than they do in PoE.
That's absolutely true also.
So, like, PoE has, like, infinitely more, like, ability and, like, damage scaling and crazy things that can happen. But at the very beginning, a lot of the abilities in PoE are pretty boring to use, other than, like, I think Arc is really cool. But aside from like that, it maybe
because it's the what in last Epoch, it's the base of what the ability is that feels good. Like I have a hammer and I'm throwing it around me, etc. And in PoE, it's about the result of what the ability is doing that makes you feel good. So in Path of Exile, when you have a bow, you're not like I'm drawing the arrow and shooting this arrow through this guy and the impact is cool. No, what you care about is deleting these fuckers off the map. So in the end of the Path of Exile, it feels way better because you don't even see your arrows. What do you mean feel the impact of? You don't feel the impact of any of it. What you want is for the enemies to feel the impact of it, and preferably you never even see the enemy on your screen because of how much you're just covered in the shit everywhere. So I think it's kind of like PoE is, you know, an example of spreadsheet simulator. as opposed to like Last Epoch is like a visual. You're going to look at it and, oh, I feel the camera shake and the lightning comes down. Like, I get where he's going with this, and I agree.
A couple other abilities, they don't like really feel good in the same way that, for example, Hammer Throw in this game, I think really kind of feels good. Warpath feels good. A lot of the things in this game, the combat in the game, has a feel-good element to it, but I also think that it has a certain level of clunkiness to it that could be like min-maxed to be better. Like Diablo 4, for a lot of its faults and a lot of its problems, does have fluidity of combat kind of down, and I think it does a very good job at that. And I
know there's going to be a million people that as soon as he says that will disagree just because it's saying something good about Diablo 4. But this is true. I play Diablo 4 and you play a werebear pulverized druid, and it actually feels good to slam through, and going from pack of mobs to pack of mobs feels pretty good too. If you look at Rob's, for instance, infinite teleport sorcerer, he's teleporting from pack to pack. The fluidity of going through it feels good. What people don't like is that the fluidity means nothing because there's no substance behind the fluidity. It is all shallow level. It is a river that is a mile wide, but a half an inch deep, and so people can feel the shallowness of it. Now, what he's basically saying is something good about D4, so people are going to say, no, it's actually not a half-mile wide river. It's only 3-inch wide river and a half-inch deep. But he is right. This river is a half a mile wide. It's just a half an inch shallow. Like, there is actually fluidity in Diablo 4.
That really, like, a min-maxed PoE character, especially with Tailwind and like different types of action speed modifications, will outpace the quality of gameplay and like feedback that a Diablo 4 character will give you. But in a general sense, I think that Diablo 4 is still kind of at the head of the pack there, and it feels better. But whenever I look at Last Epoch, I think that it's somewhere in the middle, and I would say that the lower level leveling experience in Last Epoch is the best out of the 3 games. I think that it's I think it's better than PoE, and I also think that it's better than Diablo 4.
Probably true, because D4 starts really slow. So Last Epoch gives you enough dopamine in the beginning and variety of moves and unlocks, etc., that you feel good in the beginning. And then Diablo 4 takes over towards mid-game, like level 30 to 50 feels pretty good in D4. And then it kind of falls off at like 70 plus pretty fast. And that's where like PoE is going to start taking over towards the end of it, so...
I like that you're able to change gear a lot. I like that you get really big upgrades. I like that you get legendaries early. I like that like you'll get a piece of gear and it's like really big upgrade, and then like you get to higher areas, and then the mobs are harder, and then you have to get better gear. And
the other part about this is implicits. Like you actually, as you go through the game, you get, I'm doing him disjustice with this pause here. As you go through the game, you can get better base gear that has better like implicits on it. This is something that I actually really like about Path of Exile, is that the base of the gear matters. So you actually start working about the base of the gear instead of the category of the gear. Like in D4, there's category of gear. Like, do I want the implicit of the axe or whatever? But there isn't like 13 different axes that you improve the base of the axe as you go higher. There's just the item power and what an axe does. Or like what a staff does. You're going to do a staff because you're crowd controlling people. So I want a staff base, but you only have the category instead of the category plus the base, which is what Last Epoch does. You have axes, but you have multiple different bases of axes and implicits, etc.
It feels very good. I would say there's that. I also like the fact that you don't have to go back and complete specific quests. You just have to complete a certain number of side quests in order to unlock the requisite talent points, and then also the idol slot unlocks. And I also want to say that I think that this idol thing, if I were to say like what is my favorite thing about this game, I think it would actually be this. I think this is really, really cool, and I like this a lot. I really like this idol system. I think it's so cool.
I think it's unique. I'll be honest, and me engaging with it, I don't find enjoyable in terms of me actually engaging with the mechanic, but I think it's a good mechanic. I don't find it fun to set up the idols because I hate Tetris shit where it's like, da, na, 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 na. Like, I hate that part of it. But I like the system. I don't want it changed to fit me better. I don't think that my take on this is anything outside of a subjective personal taste. But that is why I don't like engaging with it. But it is a pretty cool way of having gear set up. And it does actually give it variety of gameplay. I like it because it allows your resistances to be a little bit easier min-maxed. So it makes your gear a little bit more enjoyable to do crafting. But that's just sort of how I feel about it.
Yeah, the idols and the blessings. Yeah, they're awesome. Monoliths get repetitive. Yeah, I'm going to get to that. Now, the crafting system, like this thing here, like I'll just put an item into the crafting system so you guys can see it. I think the crafting system is nice and it's interesting. And it's certainly a lot better. Like, I think the crafting system is...
Hold on, wait for it. He's going to say not as good as Path of Exile, but obviously better than D4 that has none in it. Let me try guess.
Like, coming from the PoE crafting system, and I know about like 60% of PoE crafting, probably even, I don't know. I probably actually only know 40%, and I don't even know that I don't know the other 20%. But I know a pretty good amount of crafting in PoE. And the PoE crafting system is much more expansive and extensive than this.
True.
And I think that works as a double-edged sword. And so...
Of course it does, because people don't understand Path of Exile crafting, even the people that do it. So, and unfortunately, PoE crafting is, like, in a good and bad way, extremely detrimental to people that do not like puzzles. Like, you know how I was talking about I don't like the Tetris part of the idol system? But I do actually enjoy the crafting in PoE. That's a type of puzzle I like. That's because I don't like wood block puzzles. I like these like math puzzles or whatever, right? And I guess you could say the wood block ones are math, but whatever. So in Path of Exile, I like the puzzle system of like trying to figure out how to craft a piece of gear. But I've played the game a lot at this point, and I don't understand it to the point of I'm always making mistakes and getting roasted on the live stream, which I actually think is good, because if the crafting system was super easy to understand, like in my opinion, Last Epoch is super easy to understand, okay? Like very straightforward. Then the potential gap of people who are like great at understanding crafting and the dopamine that comes with that versus the people that are learning crafting would be too small. Like the problem with Last Epoch is I don't really think being a pro at crafting is going to make you significantly stronger of the character. It's just you have a little bit more to learn, and then you learn it, and then it's RNG, basically. I know it's deterministic, but I don't think there's like a huge skill level involved in understanding it. I mean, I myself misunderstood some of the stuff literally in the beginning, but I've only got like 70 hours into something. By the time you're 500 hours into this game, like you're going to understand it. And at that point, then it just comes down to whether or not you're hitting those dopamine spikes. So I'm kind of curious to see what his take is, though.
PoE has had like 10 years of innovation and design that's gone into its systems. And I think that obviously shows in terms of, you know, fighting an NPC like a rare that does more damage than Searing Exarch or something.
PoE crafting is not that difficult. Completely disagree. I think PoE crafting is not that difficult once you understand literally everything about it and you have 18 different tabs open with all these different tools. The fact that there's websites literally built around making you understand the crafting makes me disagree with that argument. I think PoE crafting is actually fairly difficult to both understand and implement into the game.
Something like that. But it also shows up in having gear that's like overly complex as well. And I think that really, for most players, Last Epoch's system is going to be much more in line with what they're comfortable with. And if I wasn't a PoE player of 10 years, I think that I would vastly prefer what Last Epoch provides versus PoE, because the PoE system is so hard to get into, and it's punishing in ways that I think are unfun.
I think Last Epoch did itself a huge favor by hitting the middle ground across the board and trying to have accessibility like Diablo 4 with as much depth towards the PoE as they can get. I think that if you look at Last Epoch across the board and pretty much everything that they've done, crafting is a great example of it being straightforward enough to understand without having to spend millions of hours outside of the game. and yet have enough depth to keep you interested for long enough that you've enjoyed the game. I think that was their goal, and I think they accomplished that goal. I think the crafting in the game is good. I think it is not as good as PoE, but I honestly hate that we constantly have to compare everything to PoE, because PoE, while in my opinion it's the best ARPG in the genre, is not for everybody. And I don't know that necessarily Last Epoch having as much depth as PoE would have made it sell better. To be quite honest with you, I think sometimes the game needs to have a target audience. Now, the problem is that's what D4 realized, and they swung so much the other way. And to be honest, it worked for them. They sold a ton. But now they're getting roasted on the back end of it because of how consistently easy it is sort of to play the game, that people find a lack of depth to it. And so I think Last Epoch aimed for the middle, and I think they basically hit the middle of it.
I also think that this game doesn't punish you for taking risks in the same way that I think PoE does. And like, for example, I think PoE punishes you for trying out different things or doing different things, because whenever you do something like that, you run the risk of potentially, bricking a character, especially for like in campaign. Like if you're playing one build in campaign and it's not going very well, well then it's hard to change that build because you have to use a lot of regret orbs.
Yeah.
And for like a level 37 new player, regret orbs are not something that they can realistically buy. So they kind of have bricked the character. And I think that that's really kind of like a mistake that a new player, in my opinion, shouldn't be able to make. And I think it's like an unnecessary L that PoE takes, and I wish they didn't do that. I can go and so
to be honest about it, though, even Path of Exile, GGG agrees with this, right? Because aren't they adding respec with gold in Path of Exile too? I'm curious to see how they adjust the dial in terms of Path of Exile going into Path of Exile 2, because it sounds to me like they're adjusting it more towards the Last Epoch side of things, like to make it more accessible as compared to doubling down and making it more complex.
So yeah, but like what it leads, so like the more that you punish people for making mistakes, the more people avoid making mistakes. And the more people avoid making mistakes, the more they follow guides. And I think the more they follow guides, the less intrinsic value I think that a lot of them will get out of learning things and growing in the game. Because they're just going to be following a guide like word for word, thing for thing. And that's really what they do. And so this is the same as like Lost Ark, for example, where like there's like such high gatekeeping in Lost Ark. And why is that? Well, it's because if one person makes a mistake, everybody dies. So guess what happens? Well, you have to have Light of Salvation 30 or whatever the Demon Commander one is now. And so that's what ends up happening, is that the harder that you punish players, the harder players try to avoid being punished. And I don't think avoiding being punished is a bad thing necessarily, but I think that whenever you do it to people that are unsuspecting, that don't understand the nuances of the game, you run the risk of alienating them in a way that you don't really need to. And I think
that's a good point. You ever watch like a sheepdog get a whole bunch of sheep and put them into a pen? And then what happens, right? All of the sheep are running in the same direction and going through the same bottleneck. Well, if you're a dev and you're sheep herding people through that bottleneck, but then you look at the bottleneck and you're like, oh, this is where I don't want them to be. Like, obviously there's an issue, right? So I think what he's talking about being punished is basically kind of an example of that, where it's, if you don't want people doing the same thing, then you can't ultra punish them. And in Path of Exile, an example of this would be, well, an ultra punishment is, like he said, your characters get bricked. Like, your character is garbage. And so what people are going to do is try not to brick their characters. Well, how are they going to do that? Well, they're going to go through the bottleneck of path of building and all of these different tools to understand how to build a character, which is why the second I downloaded and installed the game, everyone was telling me to plan my build before I even played it. And why I ran into problems of being a ZDPS god with my Shield Crush build, because I refused to go through that bottleneck. And I was punished for it. So I get his point.
I think that's kind of what happened with PoE for a lot of people. I also think that this game does a pretty good job of kind of like segmenting out a lot of the complexity in the game. Like, for example, like imagine if you took this, 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 and this, and you made it all one big talent tree. Well, that's effectively what PoE is, right? But at the same time, the PoE talent tree is like, a lot of people open up the PoE talent tree and they say, okay, I'm done. So I think this game provides a higher level of customization in a way that's more bite-sized, I guess you could say, and in a way that is more digestible. Yeah, to overlook.
Well, the Path of Exile skill tree is shock. It's shock and awe. Okay, it's that is the strategy with Path of Exile, although it's not on purpose. Is that you open up the skill tree and you are shocked and awed with all the possibilities. Maybe you feel pretty good about all those possibilities, but maybe you don't when you see all of the possibilities. My favorite part about the Path of Exile skill tree is the ability for them to interact with each other. And I think that's also what Last Epoch does well. For instance, the idol that we have yet to get, which is when my hammer hits somebody has a chance to cast a smite, right? We've been wanting that because it adds an interaction between the moves. But how many times have we done a Path of Exile build and we picked one of the things that interacts improperly with something else and makes my character garbage immediately, or would just straight up kill you because of the interactions between the different skills and how they work? I think this is both what can make it difficult, but also extremely rewarding when you figure out these interactions. That's why I like the Path of Exile skill tree so much, is because it doesn't feel like there's ever a lack of possibilities, and it doesn't feel pre-programmed out. They just kind of give you like a sandbox to play with. Some people don't like sandboxes, though. I mean, EVE Online is a popular game, but not for everybody. It's Path of Exile reminds me more of EVE than almost any other game.
Overwhelming, right? And like then they hear there's another one too for maps, and so it's like, yeah, there's 2 of those and 5 of these things, and so. PoE, I think, suffers from some of the same problems that World of Warcraft does, retail WoW. And that problem primarily is that the game has been designed for so long. There are so many intricacies and complexities that have been designed over into the game for so many years that it is overwhelming for a new player. And the people that are used to it love it, and the people that aren't used to it can't get into it. So it's like Basically. You're kind of pulling up the ladder every season by like one step for the amount of people that are able to like get back into the game. It's cluttered. Yeah, exactly. That's basically what's happened with PoE. And
using an expensive currency to divert a small node like intelligence or dexterity to get somewhere else feels like shit, though. I'll agree the travel progression of trying to get to another node feels bad, but here's my argument with that, which is that without the cost associated of moving around the skill tree, you actually would end up seeing less builds, not more. Because it means that it would be much easier to make a broken build because you don't have the travel times to get there. And it would also mean that the valuable nodes are much more obvious which ones are better because you can pick from anywhere on the board. So you would find the most broken combination because there's no travel times and you can just pick it on the skill tree, which would actually limit your skills in terms of what's meta and what's available. I think actually having the travel times associated with getting to nodes ends up building more variety out because narrowing your scope makes the focus more on this area, which overall makes the builds better, in my opinion. I don't necessarily believe that if feeling bad is bad for you. In the same way that it's like, you know what feels bad is investing, right? You know what feels good? Going out and buying some shit you want, right? Like I could go out and I could buy a motorcycle or something that I want right now, and that's going to feel really good. But it's going to limit my potential going into the future. Investing doesn't feel very good at all. It feels terrible. Your money's gone and there's nothing you can do with it. But in the long term, it pays out more. I see it the same way with like the Path of Exile, the way it's done.
And also, like, I think that the system of being able to like make a baseline character and then basically do your Ascendancy, I do really like the Ascendancy system in Path of Exile, and I know that a lot of people don't like the Labyrinth, but I think that the main reason why people don't like the Labyrinth is because they used to have to do it all the time in order to get the Uber Lab Helm enchants.
I don't like the Labyrinth because I don't like traps, and it's a fucking literal maze. But I love the Labyrinth because the boss is the biggest Giga Chad from any Path of Exile boss. In my opinion, he has the best voice lines. It feels fair, even if it's annoying, and the rewards are good. I both love and hate the Labyrinth.
But I think that if you look at it from a base perspective, this is my opinion at least, I actually really like the Labyrinth challenges in PoE, and I think that getting your mastery for Void Knight or whatever is actually kind of anticlimactic. And I wish that we had something in this game that was similar to the Labyrinth. And I want to preface that by saying that the Labyrinth was actually a patch in Path of Exile. Path of Exile did not launch with the Labyrinth. So this is something that probably will come. Maybe, I don't know. But I'm assuming like probably a quest for becoming a Void Knight, where like you fight some sort of void object or something like that. Like the Labyrinth,
It's not a maze. You just always go top right. You get to the past place. Getting to him is not the problem. It's the way you have to do it through these corridors while running through what's basically a maze. That part is annoying for me. You can say it's technically not a maze, and you can be gotcha Andy if you want. You're right. It's predetermined because you know they'll always go the same direction. I always know they go top right as well. However, it is still in the shape of a maze that is highly annoying. You know what I mean? Like, that's my point.
I'm not saying they should put the
Zaro
Labyrinth in
Chat,
last Epoch. I'm just saying that a baseline challenge for you to master to show that you've like earned mastery over the game and that you want to kind of become a Void Knight, I think that would be pretty cool. They had it and then they removed it. Yeah, well, maybe it wasn't a good idea. Maybe if I played the game and it had that, I wouldn't like it. But I don't know. I'm just talking about it. That's kind of the way that I feel. And so, yeah, I didn't play the game pre-release. But yeah, the crafting system, I understand about like maybe 30 to 40% of this crafting system. There are a lot of nuances that I don't fully understand and I don't fully get yet. But I think as time goes on, I'll probably learn more about it. So the campaign was good. Let's get that over with. The campaign was good. I had fun doing the campaign. So after you do...
The difference between the campaign and the story is an important point for me. I didn't care about the story, but that's my fault for not reading it. I did think the campaign gameplay was actually enjoyable. It was a good campaign.
The campaign, the main system that you do here is the monoliths. You have all these monoliths. These are basically like, think of them as like, if you played Synthesis League in PoE, it's very similar to that. And, you can target farm different items, etc. Each one has different levels. The monolith system is okay. I think that the monoliths are extremely fast, and I feel like whenever you do, for example, like, let me think of like more of a long form map in PoE, like burial chambers, you can kind of lock in. Whereas I feel like I spend almost as much time in some of these monoliths, like on a loading screen to and from the monolith, than actually doing the monolith.
There is something about the flow state of the endgame in PoE that does feel like you could blast music and just be ripping through. Whereas in Last Epoch, it's more of a methodical grind, especially with some builds over the other. I also think like traversal skills, they're not as spammable. Like in PoE, you were kind of like very, very, very quick blasting through. And in Last Epoch, at least with the build I'm running, the traversal skills aren't really as much where I'm just constantly blasting through, like constantly. I don't know that I necessarily need to blast through in order to find it an enjoyable game. I'm okay with slower paced combat as long as it feels more impactful and I enjoy the fights while they're happening. But I see where he's going with this.
It's like if you were to make a pie chart of the amount of time that I spend playing versus the amount of time that I spend going to and from playing, I think that the pie chart would have the going to and from section of that pie. The piece would be too big.
Yeah, he's right about this. I actually think there's a great point in chat, too, that the traversal skills in Last Epoch don't let you break terrain. I think this is a fantastic point. In Path of Exile, I feel like me positioning my skills to jump up on a hill or teleport over something makes me feel like we'll call it skill, but let's be honest, it's easy. My skill, at least in the game, is dictating how quickly I am going through. Someone says the leap does. It's true. We were playing Primalist earlier. There are some skills that let you do this, but it does not feel like very often I can teleport to the other side of things, or I have to target onto a minion, etc. I like how lunge feels in Paladin, but I don't necessarily feel like lunge makes me feel like I'm really moving super fast because how good I am at lunge. The ability itself seems kind of nice. So there is definitely a difference in terms of traversing through the maps.
Now, how do you fix that? I don't really know how to fix that, because I think that a lot of people might like that because they can play the game in these like very small like bursts. And also empowered, yeah, empowered monoliths might take longer, but you have to keep in mind that like I've now played the game for 30 hours. I don't think that you should expect somebody to play the game. If a game is not good on level 1, it's a bad game.
PoE lets every character's power get fairly out of control, which can be fun, but also leans in the issue of meta builds taking over. So let me ask you a question. If there are 300 builds that are considered meta, do you actually have meta builds? So my thing about Path of Exile is people use this as an argument, but I also see every day somebody coming up with a new build that makes them infinitely tanky, doing 1 billion DPS and one-shotting everything. So for me, I ask my question, is there really meta builds? Because I'm used to games where there's like 3 builds. These top 3 builds are meta. If you don't play them, you're an idiot. I've played games like that before. But in Path of Exile, it feels like you can choose between 150 builds that would be considered meta. And so I ask myself, are they really meta? Or is PoE just really good at making you be able to make your character a god based upon how you build your character? And I would lean it on it's on the latter. I don't know if it's necessarily forcing you to be meta. I don't think Path of Exile is. I just think there is a very well done system that allows you to become strong if you know what you're doing. You can look at PoE Ninja and see the main skill and determine meta. There's always going to be things that are good and better than other things. My point is there a requirement to use only a very small amount of builds in order to conquer the game? And my answer is no in Path of Exile. Tell me how many builds there are that can beat all the bosses in the game. How many builds are there in Path of Exile that can run tier 16 maps? I don't necessarily think that the term meta in Path of Exile fits the description it used to be done. There are tons of builds that can do everything in Path of Exile, are there not? So the fact that there's multiple people saying there's infinite amount, for me, kind of disproves the argument. I mean, even Quinn builds can? All right, there it is.
I really dislike the mindset that you have to play a game for this, random period of time in order to unlock the good content. The good content should be available immediately, and I think with PoE it kind of is. And with Diablo 4, I think it kind of is as well. I mean, comparatively at least, right? It's not like the content gets any better in Diablo 4. It's like at level 15, you're doing the same thing you're going to be doing at level 95. So yeah. You said it's good from the start, didn't you? I did. I did say this game is good from the start, but I think the end game for this game isn't really that interesting. Like, I don't find the end game for this game as interesting as the end game for PoE. I think that the PoE end game is a lot more interesting to me, but I also want to contextualize that and say that I haven't really interfaced a whole lot with this Circle of Fortune thing, and I need to learn more about this before I can really...
This is a pretty good way to get more loot. I don't feel like the Circle of Fortune changes what you're doing in the end game. It just adds more rewards for it.
I have that strong of an opinion.
Maybe it mixes up a bit
because
of a variety.
I think this is something that's very... what do you call it? That's very impactful, and it does play a big role in the way that you're going to enjoy the game. So, 40 favor, yeah, and I will spend this time and figure all of this out, and that will make it more interesting. But overall, I do think that PoE's endgame system is probably a bit more interesting, but I also think that towards the end of PoE's map system, I actually don't like really high-end PoE maps. And the reason why I don't like them is that they're full of like all these multiplicative damage scaling modifiers, and your character just ends up getting instantly deleted randomly, and it's hard for you to even understand what you did wrong and what even happened. Like a lot.
I don't like them personally, but I don't necessarily think that they should change. I mean, I think that the skill gap of knowledge, which is basically what it is he's describing, is fundamentally what allows people to run the higher ones. So that is the reward they get for having that knowledge that we do not have, which I think is acceptable.
A lot of the PoE death clips, for example, you have to like go back and literally watch it at like frame by frame. I find this to be like...
That's cool. I actually think that's, I'll be honest, I think that's cool. I like, because he's talking about the upper echelon. It's not this way for Uber bosses, and it's not this way for tier 16 maps. It's only for the most juiced god tier maps for the strongest builds. That is fine for me.
Very boring content and like very boring design. And I don't really like that very much. And I think it just makes the game less fun. And I think also, as somebody who played PoE from the very beginning, the game wasn't always like this. The game always had bullshit in one way or another, but the game has become more and more like this over the years because of the different, like, potential multiplicatives. Power creep tends to cause these kind of issues. Yeah, it's basically power creep. That's effectively what happens. I love the insanity that's the end game of PoE. Yeah,
most people would die from DD, and you want to know how you died. Okay, true, but even the devs themselves said that DD is not in the state they want it to be. I have complained also about DD. I think he's talking about something different, which is like fully juiced maps. Like, remember, we just came from the season of like juicing the tits out of the maps, and then you would just get one shot, etc. I think that is what he's referencing. I don't know if he's necessarily referencing like the one thing that everyone agrees is unacceptable. Quinn being detonated dead from off screen. With no warning sign on a unique boss that does infinite damage, which makes it he can't. It's obviously a joke. Like, you obviously can't do that.
I like there's a lot of things about it. I just don't like the way that difficulty scales in PoE, and I think it's too random, and that makes it less fun to me. Whereas, like, in Last Epoch, I haven't felt like that same feeling of, like, super random difficulty, where it's, like, not fun. It's like, okay, I'm doing really well, and then I get killed by something I don't really understand. So yeah, PoE before Atlas was very mid. Yeah, the Atlas map change, totally. I think that was like Maven League or something like that. Or not Maven, this was Ritual. Yeah, that was crazy good. But I do think that, like, this is generally... Last Epoch just came out. Yeah, but I'm comparing it to that, and I'm talking about the things that I like and things that I don't like about it. I do think that whenever people talk about how Last Epoch is like the good middle ground between Diablo 4 and PoE, I think that they're definitely right.
Yeah, that is the sales pitch for the game.
I think that that's true.
That is the sales pitch for Last Epoch. For the people that don't like Path of Exile, Last Epoch is an option that offers some of the things that people like about PoE, but in a easier to understand thing. For the people that like D4 but don't feel like it has enough depth, Last Epoch offers the smooth variety of style of gameplay and ease of use of character control and all of the ease of access and quality of life and blah, blah, blah. The things that come with like a smoothed out product with an actual gameplay behind it, basically. So that is what Last Epoch does well, is it sits in the middle, it tries to grab the best from both. I don't think it is the best of both. So it's not better than PoE's Endgame, and it's not as accessible as D4. But it is solidly in the middle, and I think that was their goal, and honestly, I think they pretty much nailed that one, because they're trying to pull from both audience demographics. You want hardcore ARPG fans to want to try your game, and you want more casual Andes that got introduced into the marketplace because of D4. There's more ARPG players now than there ever has been. So you want those players to want to try your game too, because they wet their beak a little bit with other games. So I think that was their goal, and I think they hit it.
Last Epoch, I think, undeniably provides a lot more customization options than Path of Exile. Than Diablo 4. But it provides a lot less than Path of Exile. And I think that it also provides a lot more tools for you to kind of craft gear than Diablo 4, and a lot less than PoE. So there are a lot more decisions that you can make in this game versus Diablo 4. But if PoE is overwhelming for you, this game probably, if Diablo 4 is too little and PoE is too much, this game will probably be what's just right.
Correct.
I will say that this game, I've enjoyed playing it a lot. I've looked forward to playing it every day, and I've played it a lot already.
What's a casual Andy? You have a full-time job and like difficulty? A casual Andy is not a condescending term to insult people who aren't min-maxed. Casual Andy means the average user that picks up the game, plays the game the average amount of hours, makes the average amount of progress, and moves on to something else. That is what the casual Andy term basically refers to. It's not necessarily people who aren't good enough to get to the end game. That has nothing to do with it. And working 15 jobs and have 85 wives would probably put you in the casual Andy area.
So, yeah, you said it else. PoE didn't start how it is now. I believe a lot more will come from Last Epoch. I think that Last Epoch has a number of, in my opinion, like extremely elegant and intelligent solutions for problems that ARPGs have. Like, for example, I don't, like, if you took every single crafting material in PoE and you put them inside of this, how would anything, like, I just think that would make the game better in a lot of ways. I do. I'm going to be honest. I think it would probably...
Well, this is one of the things Last Epoch does very well, is giving you all the tools you need to actually be able to understand and build your character out within the game itself. This is something that PoE definitely could do. I don't know if they have the capability of doing it because of how many variety of options there are, etc. Maybe they could, but it'd be one big fat fucking game guide now, wouldn't it? But the game guide in Last Epoch is very well done.
Just make the game better. Because there are just so many unnecessary and annoying things to pick up and to do. It's like, oh my fucking god. Like, you're constantly trying to, like, manage 17 different types of currencies. Inventory management, I don't think, is a fun type of gameplay. And also, this game has larger bag space dynamically. And there's, like, an instant transfer materials. So there's a lot of things that in PoE are kind of like things that waste time. Oh yeah, I am missing my ring. Thanks, before I forget. Things that waste time that this game doesn't have. Inventory management is always your end game? Yeah, I don't like that.
Inventory management is this weird yin-yang in ARPGs where it's like if you give people completely infinite space within your normal inventory, then it kind of breaks having to filter out loot and being able to decide what to pick up, and you kind of want that. But having not good enough inventory management, then we end up with a D4 Season 2 problem or Season 1 problem of the Malignant Hearts, and inventory space is completely out of control. So to be honest, inventory management is not one system I would want to have to tackle. I feel like it's very easy to fuck it up. I think Last Epoch did right. Give people infinite stash space so they can store their items, but then limit the amount of space you actually have with you. I do think the transfer materials buttons is a little weird, where it's like I pick them up and they go in my inventory and then I transfer them in. Like, why aren't they just crafting materials to begin with? That part I don't really understand. And I thought D4 did that part well, where it's like they just add the gems, or you just pick up the gems and it goes to materials now. But maybe there's some nuance behind why they do that. I don't understand.
But also, like, again, PoE's monetization system, like, it's not like it's really that bad. I just wish that, for example, like, you could do it whenever you're in your stash. Or, sorry, whenever you're not next to your stash in PoE. Yeah, always hate inventory in games. Yeah. So,
I believe it's for gifting, so you can trade it to other players. I suppose that would make sense if you really wanted to store them. Maybe that's to limit, like, you can just give a new player, like, infinite amount of the scrolls you've been storing up forever, so you have to kind of store them sideways, which gives you the ability to, like, play around saving some. I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily like that as an answer, but I get what you're saying.
A big amount of fun in this game is also variation with how each class plays. Yeah. Upcoming cycles are focused on bringing in more in-game content. Yeah. I think that really the campaign is very much good, whereas, like, whenever PoE released... Was it like Dominus or Malachi that was the... I forgot if it was Dominus, Malachi, or Kitaba. I don't remember. Which one was the last boss? Whenever was it Dominus? Whenever the game Vol Oversoul? No, that was in the beta. I think whenever the game actually released, it was like Dominus or Malachi or something like that. Yeah, because Vol Oversoul, I remember that was in the closed beta. Was it Piety whenever it came out? I don't remember. Well, either way, I think that this campaign, like, what I mean is, like, so PoE has had to improve their campaign many, many, many times, right? Like the Oriath patch, and then I think that they did, like, one other one before that. And so, like, the campaign for this game, I feel like, is already good. When did they add Atzuri? Atzuri, I think, was the first or second league. It was like a Sacrifice of the Vol. Like, I think really it's just about adding end-game activities for players to do in this game that offer dynamic and different gameplay that is separate from what you're doing in a Monolith.
I think it's what's inside of the Monolith that needs variety. I'm okay with the Monolith system. Like, I don't think that the way the map is set up, I don't think the empowereds are bad. I don't think the different monoliths and the selecting them. I like how the system's set up. I think it's a decent way of doing it. It's good enough. And I think it's when you're in the Monolith that variety would be nice. Things like the Rogue Exiles who show up and you're like, oh, there's like a little mini event. Those are nice ways to spice it up. It feels like the monoliths for me are like I'm going to sort of cut wheat. Like it's time to farm, time to, go in here and get that. Maybe if they mess a little bit with adding cycle-based content that show into the monoliths, could be kind of nice. I think that's kind of the answer to this. Because it basically, monoliths are maps, and what needs to happen is there needs to be like seasonal mechanics added in. The reason I'm not really like upset about this is because it's the first season. So if they add in seasons as it goes out, I mean, obviously I think the in-game is lacking right now, in my opinion. But I think if as the seasons come out, they add the mechanics that build upon that, seasonal mechanics, then in a few seasons, the in-game's going to be pretty good. They also just announced, if you actually pull up here, after they're talking about their Sandman reviews here, future content. They're wholly committed to making it the best RPG, and what they say is expanding in-game content, plan to expand the monoliths, new itemization, more boss content, class balance changes, campaign changes, and 1.1 specifically pinnacle content or pinnacle content boss fights. So they do sort of address this, and we're literally 6 days into the launch. If there were no communication about this, if before the launch they hadn't said they were coming out with pinnacle bosses, if there was no addressing of the end game, or this happened 2 seasons later, then I would be a little bit more bummed about the end game. But as it does seem specifically, even before the game was even out, they were addressing that. Then we'll see what goes on.
And I don't know exactly like how to solve that. I really don't know. But as I said, I think that the development team for this game is pretty smart. I actually think they know what they're doing. So I think that over time, they will figure out the solution to that kind of stuff. They're smart as fuck. Yeah. And I think that, like, really, I mean, I don't think the PoE team is incompetent either. Like, for example, I think the instilling orbs instill the sense of confidence in me with PoE 2 that I've almost never had with a game before. Because it was like literally the smartest way that you could solve a problem that every single person had. So yeah.
PoE 2 really has the potential here to like faux clear the ARPG genre. It really does. Because what Last Epoch is proving is that there are people that want the accessibility of D4, the complexity of PoE. There's plenty of those people. That seems to be what the taking away point of this is, and it seems to be what the vast majority that I have seen of people are enjoying from it. And if PoE 2 comes out and they mention stuff like the respecking, where there's gold respecking, etc., and it's more accessible like Last Epoch is, then there's going to be people that are willing to give PoE a try that otherwise do not enjoy PoE. There are plenty of people that do not enjoy PoE. They think it's overrated, or they don't understand why people talk about it so much, or they find it an annoying game, or they don't like the graphic. There's plenty of people that just do not like PoE. But I think a lot of those people will give PoE 2 a try, and I think Last Epoch is sort of proving that having depth with accessibility is something that people do crave for, and can be executed upon. I feel like Last Epoch did a good job of executing on that, and now it just needs to build upon it.
What'd you say about dungeons in this game? I think they're basically, they're okay, but like I don't find them that interesting. Without the trading stash in PoE, trading waste your time in PoE, they basically sell you time improvement. Maybe, but like I don't know if it's really that simple. But I just think like all of the currency management in PoE definitely does take you away from the gameplay. But for some people, they enjoy that type of gameplay. So I think that really it's an element of not every game has to be the same. And sometimes there are things that some people enjoy and other people don't enjoy. So like, it's not that simple. But personally, I like the system with this better because I hate dealing with inventory. Like, I want to play a game and I want to, like, you know, farm stuff and do that. It's solved with mechanics, whereas PoE is map with loads of different things to do. Yeah, but, like, I think also, like, with PoE maps, do you guys ever get fatigued and wished and you could just, like, blast through a map without having to do, like, 3 or 4 different side objectives?
Have I ever felt that way? Do I get fatigued from side objectives in PoE? I don't think I do, to be honest. I think if I see side objectives and I don't want to do them, I just don't do them. I'm not sure that I've necessarily felt like, oh, nah, one of these showed up. I think I felt that way when Harvest showed up and I felt like I was playing SSF and I needed that. But I don't think I've ever actually felt that way because when I really don't want to do it, I just don't fucking do it.
Because I sometimes feel that way about PoE. And like, for example, like that's why I hate Expedition. Expedition is like that. Like last time I just got the big bomb, dropped the big bomb. Okay, they're immune. All right, I'm leaving. And that's it. So I'll smash mobs. Yeah, exactly. You can just choose not to do every event. Yeah, but it feels bad though, doesn't it? To like choose not to do an event because
you do feel like you are missing out on rewards you could have otherwise gotten, or you almost feel like it's like the day you don't work out when you're on a workout spree, or like your cheat day on the diet. Like it feels like I shouldn't be doing this. You know, I should be doing this other thing, but I'm choosing not to, and I'm lacking gains because of it. I feel that on the occasion. But a lot of times when I skip something, I'm just like, fuck that one. That one's trash. I'm not going to play Harvest because it's dog shit. Oh, there's a Blight. I'm going to do Blight. I just prefer to not give a fuck if it's something I don't like.
You're like, I'm missing out on this, especially whenever you're spending currency in order to improve a map, in order to have it. Yeah, it's like FOMO, right? But like, no, you're right. And like, there are a lot of them that I do skip sometimes too. Balkan on Atlas. Well, like, is it weird for me to say that sometimes I feel like doing them and then sometimes I feel like not doing them and I don't want to have to like respec the Atlas every time? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the solution to this. I'm just like explaining like how a game makes me feel. Sometimes it feels annoying. Sometimes it doesn't feel annoying.
You know what's interesting is I kind of feel for like the spot he's in here where he's talking with his chat, because what's weird is sometimes you're not trying to say an objective opinion. You're trying to make an expression on how you feel about something in a game, or your you know, the emotions that come out of playing the game, or just your, not necessarily even an opinion, but as much of like when you play something, what it does to you. And then there will be people that try to argue that that doesn't happen. So it'll be like, you'll say, oh, well, you know, I don't enjoy this one aspect of the game. And then people will tell you, well, you don't enjoy that aspect of the game because you don't understand it. And it's like gatekeeping your own emotions is a really weird thing that happens with streaming. He's like, I'm just trying to express, he's right here. He's like, I'm just trying to express like how certain parts of the game make me feel. And then people will tell you that you're not allowed to have that feeling because you're not good enough, or you haven't played the game long enough. Like if having 600 hours into a game makes it where I'm not allowed to feel what I feel about the game, then I think that's a weird opinion. It's like, when am I allowed to feel what I feel about a game? Can you tell me how many hours I need to spend before I'm allowed to have an opinion? Like that stuff gets weird for me.
Like, I don't know. It feels like a chore sometimes. It doesn't feel like a chore other times. Like, I don't know what the, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the solution to this is or anything. That's just what I think. like making decisions inside of a map. Yeah, Asmongold gives extra.
You shouldn't be complaining about this. You choose to be a streamer yourself. I don't know if you're doing a very smart satire here, and I'm getting one guide, but that is a great example. That was sarcasm. In that case, very well done. It was perfectly on the line.
Expert opinion of spending 30 hours in a new game, comparing it to a game released over 10 years, and the conclusion is the game is very good, but he won't play it after a week. Is that what I said? I don't think it's what I said. But it's not really an expert opinion. I'm just giving my impressions of the game. And also after 30 hours, like 30 hours for, I would say like an average person is 2 to 3 weeks. If you're not entitled to have an opinion about, like for example with Elden Ring,
yeah, here
if
he
you're
goes.
not liking Elden Ring 5 hours into the game, I don't know, maybe you're doing something wrong, right? Maybe there's just like, you don't understand how to upgrade your weapon or something like that, or Dark Souls. But like the odds are, like if you've played it for like a couple of days and you're not enjoying the game, then maybe you probably just won't like the game. So yeah, I think that after 30 hours, like you can't expect an average person to sit through 30 hours of gameplay in order to get to the good part. I think that's a very bad mindset to have. But yeah, that's my opinions of the game. Overall opinions, I agree. I like the game. I think the game is good. And fuck, I would recommend the game. I would. I think it's a good game. If you like ARPGs, if you like Diablo 4, if you like POE, I think this game is good.
So he's giving it a thumb up.
I would say it's like an 8.
Yeah.
I think it's like an 8 to like a 9. It's probably like, I would feel very confident saying it's an 8.5, but it's, I don't know about like giving like half numbers, right? But yeah, I would say it's an 8 to a 9. Level 90 area.
An 8 to a 9, he says. You guys think that's a fair review? I gave it like a 7, 7.5. I was one of the, I think, on the lower side of the reviews. I don't necessarily think that 7's a low rating. I think it's a higher rating. But some people see 7 as a bad number. I think 7 is basically a thumb up. Maybe not 2 thumbs up, but it's like a thumb and a half. I feel like an 8 and a 9 are very high ratings, and the 10 is like, you literally don't think it could get better.